Hi everyone, this is my first YouTube video and I'm really excited to start this channel because I've been wanting to do it for a while and sort of share my experience as a graduate student in clinical psychology. So for this first video, I really just wanted to focus on the application process and what that was like for me, and hopefully it could be helpful to some prospective applicants. First of all, I just wanted to say I'm in the PsyD program. So it's a doctoral program for clinical psychology, and it's similar to a PhD program, but there's less emphasis on research. In most PhD programs, you're applying to do research under a specific faculty member, whereas in a PsyD program, research isn't as heavily mandated. That's because for most PsyD programs, the people who come out of it are going to be working as practicing clinicians. And that's not to say that people with PhDs can't be practicing clinicians, meaning doing therapy or assessment with clients, but a lot of PhD students end up continuing on a path of academia or research. Again, that's not everyone. My program, and I know most PsyD programs that I'm aware of, are 5 years, and it's 4 years of academics and practicum experiences, which is clinical hands-on experience working with clients, and then 1 APA accredited internship year. So that's your 5th year. An APA accredited internship position is pretty much the most important piece in a doctoral program in clinical psychology, because you can't get your licensure without an APA accredited internship. It's definitely not the only thing you need to get your licensure to complete the degree by any means. There's a lot of other requirements like a dissertation and meeting all of your practicum hours and obviously completing the coursework. Obviously, probably most people who are applying to graduate school and will be competitive applicants for it are already pretty driven and goal-oriented. That's just like a really big goal, is how I look at it. Something to take into consideration if you're thinking about a PsyD program is doing your research. What I mean by this is making sure that you know the program statistics on their APA internship match rates. This means that you want a PsyD program to have 100% or very, very close to 100% APA internship match rates. You also want to make sure the program itself is APA accredited. Otherwise, the degree just doesn't really count for anything. And I'm talking about PsyDs and PhDs. Master's programs have a whole nother accreditation body. This is specifically really important to look for in PsyD programs though, because there are a few PsyD programs that are essentially degree mills, meaning they charge a lot of tuition to admit a lot of students, meaning that not all of their students are going to be getting an APA accredited internship match. PsyD programs also often get the rep that they're really expensive. And I will admit, compared to PhD programs, which are usually fully funded with stipends, PsyD programs are expensive. But the good ones, meaning the APA accredited ones with high match rates, are going to be more affordable. This also isn't necessarily true, just because there are opportunities in good PsyD programs to have assistantships, meaning you're doing research under a faculty member. You could get partial or even sometimes full scholarship for that. There are different teaching assistantships, opportunities to teach and do research for tuition money. I actually applied to PhD programs, PsyD programs, and master's programs because I didn't really know, truthfully, how competitive of an applicant I was going to be. I knew that long term I definitely wanted to get my doctorate, and so that was something that played a factor into my decision-making process. Ultimately, with finances, thinking about the trajectory of my career and my general interests and fit with the program, I chose a PsyD program. So the real question, and probably the reason you're watching this video, is because you want to know how I got here, how I got admitted into a PsyD program and how I applied. And so there's a bunch of key components in an application process, but I'll just walk through a few of the most important ones that make up an application. First is thinking about taking the GRE. The GRE is a standardized test for different graduate programs, and sometimes schools require the psychology specific GRE. Now, none of the programs that I actually applied to required the psychology specific one. They just wanted the general GRE. And so I'm going to show you the books that I used to study study for that. I found them to be very helpful. So the books that I got actually came in a pack of 3. So I have this one, which is the verbal reasoning practice booklet, general tests, so it's just practicing taking the test a bunch of times, quantitative reasoning booklet, so that's basically math. I got these because they're made by ETS, which is actually the company that makes the actual GRE test. I'm not sponsored by them in any way to this video. I would recommend getting these books. Unfortunately, they're a little bit pricey, but totally worth it in my opinion. You're gonna wanna think ahead about taking the GRE because sometimes you would wanna take it more than once. So let's say you take it once and then your scores aren't exactly where you want them to be. You can always take it again and send those other improved scores if you'd prefer. You wanna give yourself months and months in advance of actually applying and sending in your applications because you don't want to be in a situation where you're feeling rushed to take another GRE to get your score up. You really want to have time to practice and improve your score. Another thing to be thinking ahead about is letters of recommendation. You're going to have to ask your letter writers in advance, and oftentimes the people that you're going to be asking to write your letters are professionals, and so they also have very busy lives. I would definitely recommend asking at least 3 months in advance of when you're going to be applying. Most of my applications closed on December 1st, so I made sure to ask my letter writers by like August. I think a lot of people struggle with sort of this, who do I ask for my letters of recommendation question. It is a very important question. You definitely don't want to take that lightly because schools are going to take them seriously. They're looking for an ability to be professional and create rapport with supervisors and people who have taught your classes. If you think about it, those are the types of settings that you're going to be involved in at a graduate level. I asked a faculty member who I was relatively close with because I worked in his lab for 2.5 years as an undergraduate research assistant. I felt like he could speak to my professionalism in an academic setting, and he could also speak to the rigor of my academic course load because he was a tenured faculty and he knew the types of classes that I was taking, how challenging they were, and how much work I had to put in to do well in them. I also asked a supervisor from a clinical experience that I had. One of my jobs involved working with people who had severe mental illness, and so I asked one of my supervisors, and that I think spoke to my ability to create rapport with clients, create rapport with supervisors, and how I act in a clinical setting, which is super important. The third person that I asked was a mentor of mine. She actually was a graduate student at the time, but she taught 2 classes of mine in my counseling minor at my undergraduate university. And so I thought that she knew me really well because of these 2 classes that I had with her, and I thought that she could speak to not only my academic performance in a counseling related class, but also my character as a human being. When you ask a letter of recommendation writer to write your letter of recommendation, you definitely want to ask specifically, are you able to write me a strong letter of recommendation? And this is a really important question because you don't want someone who's going to write you a weak letter of recommendation that doesn't really speak to any of your abilities, any of your character as a human being, or any of your professionalism. You don't want to ask someone who you don't think knows you well. It's gonna show in the letter. They're gonna be able to tell that this person doesn't know you very well if they're talking in very vague statements or they're not really diving into what they're saying about you. So definitely asking if they can write you a strong letter of recommendation is super important. The next thing that's really important to know about, think ahead about, is writing a statement of purpose. You definitely want to cater each statement of purpose to the individual school that you're applying to. What I mean by that is taking into consideration faculty interest and how your interests fit into that. Taking into consideration what their values are as a program and how your prior experiences through work or volunteer or research fit into those values. I actually wrote like 10 drafts of mine. If you have a career development center at your school, not everyone is going to grad school right from undergraduate, but I just happen to be. If that's your situation, I would definitely utilize the resources that the campus is offering you. I went to the Career Development Center for my school, and they actually had a specific person who was specializing in helping people with psychology writing. This was super important and helpful because my first draft to my 10th draft was like night and day. Like, you don't know when it's your own writing. Like, you can't see all of the little things, but trust me, you definitely want to get someone to review it. A really great piece of advice that I got from my career development coach who helped me edit my statement of purpose was think about your statement of purpose in 3 different parts. I want to talk about where you've been, where you're going, and why this school. Where you've been, you want to talk about how your prior volunteer work experiences confirmed that you want to be in this field. Where you're going, you want to talk about your short-term goals, your long-term goals, any idea of the type of clinician you want to be. If you have an idea about the populations that you're interested in working with, that's a really great thing to talk about. If you're interested in a specific area of research, that's a really great thing to talk about. If you're really passionate about policy reform and advocacy and you want that to be a part of your career, or teaching, it shows that you've given it thought and it shows that you have taken it seriously. And then finally, why this school? Obviously, this is a very important piece to a statement of purpose, and you want to emphasize again why that specific school matches your values, why that specific school will give you the opportunity to have the career that you want. So the next piece to the application puzzle is writing up a CV or a resume. I had a resume at the time. I didn't make a CV until I was actually in grad school. Either way, it's fine, but I did a resume, and the most important thing about writing a resume is making sure that not only do you have all the information that you want on there and all of your skills and the assets and experiences that you've had that you feel you can bring to the table, but also want it to look visually appealing. You should definitely, like your statement of purpose, get it reviewed by other people. You want to use the same tense throughout. That's something that I, in my first couple drafts, was just like lazy about it. It was like all over the place, and if I didn't have someone else look at it, I would have just looked really stupid and like I hadn't really prepared my resume properly. Those are like the main points of an application. Every school is going to be a little bit different, so you're definitely going to want to cater your application materials to whatever that school wants. Again, if you're applying to doctoral programs, the deadline is usually December 1st. Applications close on December 1st, and then you start hearing about interviews like late December or January. A lot of my interviews were in late January through February. And since I'm on the topic of sort of the timeline of applying and interviewing and accepting offers, I did want to throw in there just something about Grad Cafe and other sites like it. So if you're not aware, there are sites that exist like Grad Cafe that have online forums for applicants and current graduate students to talk about their experiences applying. This can be really beneficial, and it can also be really detrimental to your mental health. I became like addicted to checking Grad Cafe every day. I would check like 100 times a day for updates because each specific school has, if you get an offer or you get an interview invitation, you can write on there like, okay, February 3rd, got an interview invitation. My interview is set for February 20th. It's really helpful because people know that the invitations have begun, kind of eases some anxiety, but then if you haven't gotten one yet, it's kind of like, what do I do? And then you're just waiting and checking and refreshing and refreshing and refreshing. It's even worse after interviews, because when people get offers and you don't get an offer, it's kind of like a bummer. I would just use caution when using those sites because, like I said, they can be really helpful. Also, on the flip side, can be kind of a bummer, and if used too much, can be very draining on your mental health and self-esteem. I really do think that you can start preparing for this process throughout college. I feel really lucky because I went into college knowing sort of what I wanted to do, and so I kind of was able to cater my experiences through volunteer and work and research toward that end goal of getting into grad school. But you also don't have to know right away to be able to do all of this and to be able to figure it out and build a good resume. A lot of people take gap years to get all of that experience and to make sure that they know that this is the right field for them. Not only is it important to have clinical experience for your resume, but it's also really important just to confirm that you actually do want to be a clinician. I know a lot of people who have done volunteer experiences where they're like, well, you know, I don't think I really want to work with kids anymore. And that's totally okay, because challenging experiences can be just as valuable in deciding what you want to do. And you don't want to spend a whole bunch of time and money on something if it's not actually what you want to do. I hope that these tips and tricks and pieces of information were helpful to someone. I can't believe I'm saying this, but comment, like, and subscribe down below.